Here we go.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Weird Science Indie Comic Boom podcast slash YouTube video. I never know what to say. Hey, I'm here with Rocky. What's up, Rocky?
Oh, life is good, my friend. Even though it's the first week of September here, but it's still actually pretty good summer here. I managed to barbecue some steak, had a Corona with the wife. It was still some pretty good weather here. So I'm still under the illusion of summer. Came off a very hard working week at work. So I'm actually really it was fun. And reading these. Nice to read some independent comics because
Hmm.
I thought it was a decent week for DC. I enjoyed Dark Crisis and Flashpoint Beyond. Made me feel a little bit better about DC, and the books we're reviewing now are kind of fun. So yeah, we're
Yeah,
good way to
I
start
like
the week
both
off
of
here.
those. I even like Batman.
Yeah,
It kind of
that's
might
true.
have ended there. I even like maybe a couple at Marvel, but these books are pretty good. And as you're saying, you're a working man, which obviously is a Rush song, and that's my Canadian reference for you. I always have to come up with at
Well,
least one. But we're here, and we have the two books, and we have Starhenge, which will continue. We've done each of those issues. I'll again lean on you. You're more of the Starhenge fan, and we're also going to start a new one, the Boogeyman #1. And we had some choices, and again, it started getting late. I do apologize. I wanted to do more books tonight, and we'll get to a point where we do more. But old Gabe actually recommended this one. That's why I wanted to check it out anyway, and then we decided to do that. And it's a
yeah.
different type of feel from what we were doing anyway. So I do enjoy that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about these. Even like we said, at sometimes we lean on these indie books when we have a bad week. But if you have a good week, they're still pretty cool. Cool way to end. And you end up, you're drinking it up, I heard. You told me that you found some extra alcohol and you're maybe
I did
gunning it. I don't know as we're talking. I don't
Smirnoff
know.
Ice at the moment. Smirnoff Ice, which
Nice.
is that's good.
Yeah, so we'll start off with Stone. I keep wanting to say Stonehenge, which is funny. It's because we do end up seeing a lot of Stonehenge in this book. But you'll bring up the idea that a lot of reviewers think that this is new developments. It's not quite. It's not quite. First off, the book's called Starhenge. I mean, you realize it might come up and things like that, but it has been set up. This is book one, the Dragon and the Boar, issue #3. And we'll just get into it with the idea. It's written, illustrated, and lettered by Liam Sharp. I always get thrown off when I see that font by Dave Gibbons. Every time I open oh, it's that font. But it's Liam's stuff. And if you have been reading this, you kind of know what you're in for. You end up having, drawing in this, and the art is incredible. It really is. And I don't know about you. It's funny because the last time we talked about it, if you remember, we were saying that it had maybe too many jumps in art style, too many times that it changed its way and going. And in this, when I read it, I have to apologize to Liam Sharp. I'm like, man, he really went like really straight laced with this one. He didn't really jump around. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. We were actually complaining last issue. And that actually, in the deal before we started recording, you even said that it was a bit tough. I had a real tough time getting through last issue. It was really dense. You had a lot of stuff going on, and with those jumps, a lot of swipes, things like that. I found it a little more confusing than I was hoping. This one, if I'm going to complain about anything, it's that we don't progress the plot as much as I thought we would. But it is an easier read. May not. I even think it might be a little better. It actually gets you kind of getting your feet planted, but I really wanted more progression. And I think that one of the things I thought last issue, you ended up having so much dumped on you that I do think even Liam's like, okay, I got to pull it back. I wish that you could have combined these two in a pacing and a way that you did it, that we would have continued through these two to go forward with the overall story. Because when you start seeing a little more of that overall story I want more. I want it more right away. And it kind of was frustrating when I ended thinking, oh man, like we didn't really get much here. But what about you?
Uh, th well, you basically summed it up. I thought the first issue did an amazing
Yeah.
job encapsulating so much rich information. In fact, there's a lot of information that is in the first issue that we still haven't elaborated on. The second issue
Yep.
hinted at Stonehenge, And this third issue really drags out and spells out how Stonehenge is this magical place. And it ties into the central premise of the story that the Ur Queen in the far future sends her son Wilt back in time to become Merlin to restore magic in Earth's past in order so that in the future Earthlings, we Terrans can use the magic to defeat
Hmm.
a future alien threat called the Cast, and we can own. And in a battle between science used by the Cast and magic, the magic will prevail. But the Cast has traveled back into Earth's time and destroyed the beginnings of magic in Arthurian legend, and so the Ur Queen has sent her son back, who is really Merlin, into the past to create Stonehenge, hence which has becomes a Starhenge, hence the
Yeah.
name of the story. So that's the central idea. So the concept itself, I think, is really cool. And the idea that this Stonehenge is sort of this centerpiece in time, and that time itself is not linear. It really plays itself out in this third issue, and it really spells it out for the reader. So that if the second issue lost people, I think this third issue, I'm hoping, will pull some more people back in.
I agree, and it's almost like you got so fancy in that second, and
Yeah,
I'll dumb it down the way I thought of it. It's almost like you thought you told the most hilarious joke in that second, like that was that you were going to get, and then realize nobody understood it. So then you have to kind of explain the joke in the third
exactly.
issue. It feels like that to me, and those the worst thing to ever have to do is explain a joke because nobody's laughing at an
Yeah,
explanation of a joke. But in this, I still was okay, and I still was interested, and in this, when we have all these different art styles and things, if you're going to go full out pretty much Conan, and I mean, I'm talking about really half of these things, you could just take these visuals and put the font and say that it was a Conan novel back in the day, and nobody would ever think anything of that. They would
yeah,
think it is. And I really like that. But again, in that, you do have in a lot of big pages, big things with, not a lot of panels. So you're not saying a lot in each one. And when we're spending half the issue, looks incredible, but half the issue is almost, hey, we're going to have a cut. We know we're going to get Stonehenge. We know you're going to do that. We know that's important. And it's almost like it gets a little too much like, okay, just have it happen. Like this issue needed to be, like you said, be more, a little more easy to follow, but also some really big things are going to happen, but we can't have it now. We're going to get it. And it felt weird. And I'll tell you, the last issue, a lot of people, even I saw a lot of other reviewers were taken aback by, oh man, there's out of nowhere. It's about comic making and it's breaking the fourth wall. And it was kind of off-putting. It continues here in the narration, but at the end, I thought, okay, well, it's our girl that we're following here, and she's talking
Amber.
to us.
Yeah,
Amber's talking to us, and I don't mind that, though. I don't need her to be so foul mouthed. She needs to, get her mouth washed out. But even so, it does maybe at this point where I think that Liam, maybe some people don't like it, but it does pull you into the story a little as if you're being told the stuff specifically, hey, this, but it gets a little jokey even when I know we have Stonehenge, okay? I know that you want to do it, but you don't have to mention Spinal Tap, especially because the whole deal where all I think of with Spinal Tap is just the idea that it's real small. That, oh my God, and so it's not just, oh, it's over here, like saying, I'm like, that might have been a little too much. I know you're getting jokey, but it doesn't feel like you should or need to be jokey at any point in this book. I do like having the little sass, remember, or even her having, her own way of things, but it seemed like there were some jokes he wanted to tell because it was there and it didn't really fit, but everything else I do like. And just as a shout out to your dad, it made me laugh so much. I'm
yeah,
reading this, and when she ends up saying, yeah, and I went to Stonehenge to check it out, really underwhelming. There was nothing to it, a bunch of rocks, all this things, and it's exactly what your dad said. He was looking forward to it. I said I went, first off, I was a little kid, so it did look bigger, and I was at the point you could touch it, and I touched it. Even then, it's not anything that I'll tell you, oh, it was my favorite thing, it was the greatest thing ever, but it did make me laugh that she had that same reaction. And so when we get through this whole deal, you're going through a lot. I said you're going through a lot of how, and I like the way that Liam Sharp is playing this. Hey, listen, it could have been that they used pulleys and logs to roll it, but it also could have been giants that threw it across the deal and ended, and that's a fun play on history. When you end up where I remember my one buddy ends up, there were no dragons. They must have found dinosaur bones. And I think at one point I said to him, but isn't it more fun to think there's dragons? Like, isn't that the fun thing? And he got all mad at me because so in this, I do like that you have that history being told of, yeah, it could be what they kind of figured out the way but it also could have been this. And I thought that the way the thing is playing out, that is pretty cool. I like that. But when you get to Amber and you see this connection, we start to see these things, especially when she's going over and you are doing, and Liam Sharp does it really good with the art of, if time is starting to envelope in itself, whether or not they know it, and I thought that was really cool. I thought that was really neat. I was excited, and then the issue ended. I'm like, oh man, why did you end there? I want more of that.
It's a really good tease because you have Merlin, who's from the far future, sent into the past, and because of the effects of time travel, he's kind of, his memory is a little murky, but he knows he's from the future. He knows he's got to restore magic in the past, and he's given Lord Arthur, or I guess King Arthur, who will become King Arthur, Lord Arthur, the instructions to move these stones to create Stonehenge, creating this round mount, this mystical mount to help restore magic. And yet somehow there's a connection that Amber in the present day is feeling the connection by touching the rock.
Yeah.
She can sense Merlin, and Merlin can sense her. And what does all this mean? We don't really know, to be quite blunt, because it's all tied up, and there's Venn diagrams and there's circles, and you can see the math and the physics of it in the background in the beautiful illustrations by Liam Sharp. And that sort of corresponds with the perfect roundness of Stonehenge when it's originally created, and even the chaotic nature of modern day Stonehenge, which is now just sort of a conglomeration of rocks that is sort of mundane and sort of boring looking if you go there in modern day. And so I can't help but note that, I don't know about you, but when I surf on YouTube, every now and then I get a YouTube short where somebody talks about, the mystery of Stonehenge. And so this is something that we see a lot in our social media right now. How was Stonehenge created and all this other jazz. So kudos to Liam Sharp for having some fun with this, taking something that I think a lot of us who are history buffs, or like myself, or even if you're not, it's kind of curious, because when you think about it, who in the hell would put a bunch of goddamn rocks in the middle of nowhere 5,000 years ago, or whatever the hell it was?
Yeah, I love it. And again, in things that also I like you take like a Hellboy, for instance, where a lot of times when they're doing that, Mike Mignola ends up, end up fumbling his name. You end up where he tries to even get, okay, this happened. I like when people do books where they take something that did actually happen or does actually exist and then plays around with the myth around it, maybe gets a deal. And I like the idea here too, because Merlin goes back. This is just a guy who ends up going back. And like you said, his main thing is he's got to bring magic back to humanity. If he fails, we're all done. We're all done. We're going to get destroyed by, these machines that end up using just science. So he's doing this. And in the meantime, I thought he'd go back and you'd have Arthur. Hey man, what up? And high five. Arthur at points it seems to detest him. He doesn't want anybody like, oh, look at you. And then he, even with the idea, might be jealous about how he is with the ladies. I mean, you get a bunch of things that I'm like, that's more realistic. I'm glad that it's not. This isn't just like a superhero book where you're going to end up having the two heroes fight for a page and then they're best friends. This is a guy, and this is a time where that's not like that. And they are again. I love, and I forgot to mention what I think my favorite part is the combo. Like I said, when you have Amber say the same thing that your dad, that made me laugh. But when they go to get the rock for Stone, and there it is, and they get to there, and what is this rubble? This piece of crap deal. It was even a piece of crap before it even got to England. I'm like, that's pretty funny. That they're like, there's, and to make that though, I think such a cool point. It is just a bunch of rocks. I mean, when you go, it's funny. When you go to Stonehenge, you, my dad, or your dad, me, my mom, when you go, you are expecting something big. But you'd never I don't think your dad would say, well, I was expecting this. I mean, he just, you hear about this. There's such an aura around it and a mysticism. But when you get there, it's just a bunch of rocks. And that makes me laugh when that's what they are. But in this story, these are going to help save the universe. I mean, you need that. So they are very impressive, but they're just a bunch of rocks. It's not. I think it would be a little hokey to go here and grab these things and they glowing and talking and everybody's floating around. No, they're just so you end up having this idea of something that they keep pish poshing, and even it's not even a henge. It's just some boulders. What are we gonna do now, wizard? You jerk! Well, this is it. And yeah, this is it. This is what you need to do and help out with because this will save the universe. And I think at some point you could even get the play of what do I care? What do I care about I'll be dead by then. I don't care about that. And you might even have that play. But I do really like that idea that it is something that yeah, it has a lot of myth and things around, but it is just a bunch of rocks, especially to these people who are supposed to be when we hear the legends, in all of this, and oh, it's the greatest thing. So I really thought that was neat. But then when you get to the end, after Amber pish poshes it, then we realize that it is big because there's that connection when she ends up going up to it and sensing and all that. And I thought that was really cool. I really
Yeah,
like that. I
and
like that juxtaposition of it.
that's exactly right, and at the end, where there's this because Stonehenge is this centerpiece, and it's based on this idea in the mythology here that Liam Sharp has sort of created in that time is not linear and that
Yeah.
time is existing sort of all at once. And so you have, just as you have Merlin touching the Stonehenge back in whatever 12th century England or whatever the hell it is,
Hmm.
and then the modern day with Amber touching the rock. And then this issue ends with what appears to be a member of the cast appearing in front of Amber and
I
Daryl,
know.
and they're near Stonehenge. And just to remind people who remind readers, because there's a lot to take in, what makes the cast so interesting is that they're the opposite of us humans in that they actually, just like we sometimes wear our machines, like we will wear a watch, we'll
Hmm.
wear glasses, we'll wear a mask, they will wear skin, they'll wear
Yep.
humans. So this last image, the last image on the page is of this machine wearing a human skull, because it's almost like they're the opposite of us. And of course
Yeah.
they want to destroy us, just like they control almost like organic life forms, whereas we as humans, we kind of pride ourselves on controlling the machines. So
Yeah.
in many ways we're the exact opposite in terms of civilizations, and we're in conflict. But yet the irony is that we're not utilizing machines to fight each other. The machines are utilizing science, but we need to utilize magic to defeat them. And of course, we don't know, we don't believe in magic anymore because magic has been erased from our history, and we need Merlin to go back in time to remind us of our magic. And
Yeah.
there's something beautiful about that and poetic about that I really like about this story, because of course we live in a very scientific world, cause and effect.
Yeah.
And that's what I like about this story. And where I hope Liam Sharp doesn't lose it is sometimes magic-based stories lose me a little bit because they don't establish the rules of magic enough.
Hmm.
Like I hope he establishes. I hope it's not too. I hope this doesn't end up being a Duke Ex Machina ending, and this is more of a. I'd like to know what, if there are some rules of magic, what they are, because I got to say that, so far 3 issues in, I'm really enjoying this new rich mythology and everything else. And just as a quick aside, I have to say this, because I've listened to your podcast on DC, and my quick comment on the Crisis. You know,
Hmm.
in comparison to DC's Crisis, like, if, to me, understanding the DC multiverse is very simple. You got a universe, you got a multiverse, and in between you got hyper time. That's not rocket science.
Hmm.
It's a variation of that over the last 50 years. This is far more complicated and yet interesting. And if people can understand this 3 issues, you can understand the DC universe.
Yeah, if you're saying that they're like, yeah, that's too. I'll give you a bit of a diss on the DC deal, which I don't like to do right now because a lot of people are, heaping it on. But the one thing that this has over the Dark Crisis is this feels big. I mean,
Yeah,
when you're doing
that's
this
right.
and the idea when you're like, oh my God, if they fail here, we're all done in the future. But even the idea of playing that, like, what happens then? Because, like you're saying, right now we're more scientific based, is and playing the idea because magic was taken away or whatnot. I want to see even if they end up winning, what then goes on and goes on. I hope that it just isn't that one story and then okay, we're done and go. Because I think that there's more potential to actually then open it up and maybe even get a simpler story with a lesser focus, but seeing more of the world. And it's funny because you say about the rules of magic. Right before we recorded this, me and my man Luke did our manga show, and there was a new manga. And basically, my one biggest complaint, and one of my only complaints, because we did like it, was that there's magic involved, and they never gave the rules of the magic. And I was going on and on. I went on and on about it so much that I had to actually apologize, because I said, I think I'm harping on this too much, but it's a pet peeve of mine, because then you don't know how the world can go. You don't know what's going on, what can happen. And so I hope that, like you said, I hope we get some parameters. I hope we get to learn some more of that. And we probably should. And at the end, and you described it great, at the end you have the deal where this machine has come back and is wearing a human skin. And if you look, it's horrific. It is bolted on, stretched on to the point where it's even like, you're not fooling anybody. I mean, it looks horrific, but that's what they do. And it looks like the Predator. So I ended up, oh no, the Predator. But I did like it. And I did appreciate some of these where, yeah, you have that star chart. You have some of the things end up, they're trying, like, almost like you're trying to be fancy. But even in that, I like when he throws it in, because it's not anything. It's a scientific chart, but it's there to look like a scientific chart, and then ups kind of the ante of some of the things. But by the end, you just get a spread page that's it looks great, but I'm saying it's not anything confusing. You see something, and then you end with boom, oh no, part of the cast, and so there's not any sort of confusion. You're ready. And even if you feel like you've been left behind a little, especially last issue, a lot of people probably were, this one is good enough that, all right, we're back on track. I understand what we're getting. But if you did understand that the last issue, and you were in and like, oh, this might have been a bit of a letdown, just because it did feel like, okay, everybody catch up. Let's get everybody on the same page. Let's get going. But some of the connections, at least seeing those Amber and Merle, that was really cool. I'm glad we got that. Yeah. And like I said, some of the art, yeah, there's changes. I'm looking through it, but not like last issue. Last issue was all over as if you had 10 artists on it. And they were, some of the things really threw me off, though I really do like the one page. There's one page that's really, I think, a lot different, that almost looks like it's pulled straight out of like an Alan Moore Swamp Thing book, when everything else is almost to the point of being at points photorealistic at times. And I really like that page a lot. And you have some narration on that. You see more. So I did like this. What would you give it?
It's gotten me back on track here. I like that this feels a little bit more like he's pulling it in, and I didn't have to reread this twice. I read it once, and I felt like I was back in the story.
Asleep.
Yeah. So I got to give this. I'm back. I just love King Arthurian legend, and I'm just a sucker for that. I'm a Game of Thrones guy. I love Game of Thrones. I love the House of Dragon, all that jazz. So I'm giving this an 8. I really enjoyed this.
I'm going to give it an 8 as well. And when I say I didn't fall asleep, I want to apologize if that offended. I'm not saying that it bored me. What happens is, if I end up doing something because of my brain and things get too overwhelming, that's when I start getting, it's part of the condition I have. I start getting very tired. I start to wander. I start to drift. That's why it ended up happening, because that last issue was so like things just coming at you, the transitions, the things. I started getting confused. I started getting, a little dizzy. But this next book is not, it's not anything like this, Starhenge. It's actually more of a horror book, which we haven't had too many of those yet on this, which is why I was glad that we actually picked it. This was picked, or at least suggested by our man Gabe, said that it was really good. I think he might have thought it was a little better than I thought by the end. I still liked it for number 1 issue, and I am intrigued, but we'll see. It's the Boogyman number 1, and it's by Matthew Salvia, art by Dejet, I guess, or Jet. It's published by Ablaze Comics and came out September 7th, 2022. I'll give you the solicit here so we know what we're going about. Monsters don't only exist in children's minds. Passionate about reading, Elliot has always had a preference for the stories of boogeymen, those monstrous creatures which at night hide in the shadows or under the bed to frighten little children. He can't imagine how much they will change his life. Witnessing the bloody murder of his parents, he will discover that in reality, boogeymen do indeed exist, and very precise codes govern their existence. When one of the most powerful boogeymen, Father Death, decides to protect him, Elliot finds himself plunged into a terrible conflict at the heart of a universe as terrifying as it is fascinating. On a dark, stormy night, Elliot's destiny will be fulfilled. So that is a bit of a spoiler for a
It
solicit.
is. You know
I'm
what? I
thinking to
never
myself,
read.
like, why do you spoil it that much in the solicit,
I
right?
gotta tell you, man, I never read the solicit. I just heard it for the first time since you read it, and it actually
Mhm.
kind of clarified some of the things for
Yeah, it
me,
does.
to be honest. Because I'm glad I never read it because I, I, because in the first half of this story, I honestly, through the first half, I thought this was kind of boring. This was kind of tropey.
Hmm.
I thought this was just a kid who claimed to see boogeymen and complained to his parents, and that he got, and that the parents didn't believe him, and that it was going to be, it felt like a very by the numbers horror story. Haven't I read this or seen this story a
Hmm.
thousand times on TV in your B-level horror movie? And then and then found it far more interesting when the boogeyman appears, but the boogeyman that appears is sort of like this grandma boogeyman, and there's almost like a turf war saying like, oh,
Yeah.
we're sorry, the grandma accidentally stumbles upon, she becomes the boogeyman to this kid, but then realizes that this kid already has a boogeyman, and then you find out at the end it's Mr. Death. And
Yeah.
then apparently there must be more to this story. Why is Mr. Death the boogeyman of this kid, and he has this wolf? And I got all these questions, and I don't know really kind of what's going on, but I
Yeah.
gotta admit I'm intrigued. I have to admit it.
I'm intrigued. The thing is, again, when we talk about this, maybe we'll get fired up a little more. I don't know that this isn't my thing. I'll tell you right now, I don't like horror stuff. And the funny thing is, when we're reading this, like Elliot likes to read stories about the boogeyman. I'm like, what is wrong with him? I hate stuff like that. Like, I know people love like a Stephen King and things like that. Never with me. I hate horror movies. I hate things because I do get too scared, and I get way over the top. As a kid, I thought everything was real anyway. I would have been way over the top, but you end up where you start here, and you do have a time thing. You start in the present, and then we're going to go back and see what happened. But in that, I thought, like you did, I thought that where we're going now, it's called the boogeyman, so we're going to go into this. I think this, and he's drawing pictures, and I'm like, okay, right off the bat, I'm thinking, okay, does what he draw come to life? Like, are we going that tropey? We've
Yeah.
seen that amount, but it's not quite that. But you end up being told, like, okay, something happened. He's the only one who witnessed it. He ends up having, but by the end, when I ended up thinking about the beginning, I'm thinking to myself, like, Elliot, you're putting all these people, I would think, in danger of what is going on because of the crazy things. Because even then, where she's like, okay, what are you drawing? Can you tell us? No, I can't. Well, why not? Is it because, and he ends up looking, you see this huge giant dog. It's just that I don't remember anything, but you know that he must, and he's
Yeah.
being threatened. I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but what's going on? And the art, it's a weird play because the art is more cartoony. And even when you explained it, I'm telling you, if you skewed this idea and you said, hey, get this, this story is about these boogeymen, and say it's a Pixar movie. Yeah, each house has a boogeyman. It's like Monsters Inc. now. But this person wanted to be the boogeyman of this kid. Oh, they realized that they already had a boogeyman. And then they ended up there. You can think of that as something, okay, that could be a kid's story, even whatever. But when you get into this, they end up having very, the art is cartoony, but then when the violence comes, boy, it kind of gets over the top with that and with what's going on. And I start to feel bad because there's a kid, his parents are dead. I'm like, this poor kid. These are the reasons why I hate horror stuff, because you kind of are supposed to leave that stuff behind at point. I can't. But even then, like you said, you end up in the authorities there, and it looks like the police or whatnot, and they're trying to figure out who killed his parents. We don't know that quite yet, but he can't talk, he says, and he's writing pictures and stuff, and they're grabbing him and trying to see what that means. And of course, he can't say anything, but he's drawing pictures of boogeymen and stuff. But then they end up, why can't you tell? Well, I can't. I don't remember. He's lying. But then we go back to a month earlier when we do see what happened. I'll give it to you because I do. I end up, I don't know how I can explain it. Like, I think that this is such, like, you don't see, the parents are very nice and you don't want them to die, but then they die. And I don't quite get the idea exactly of what we're talking about here, especially when this old granny ends up coming. And is it like, has this kid drawn them to him? Is something gone, or is this just random, random
Yeah.
violence by boogeymen? And it just ended up where I was just confused of, just not the rules, but just the idea of the basis of the story. By the end, when you said turf war, all right, now we're almost talking like, Neil Gaiman light there, where this
Yeah.
seems pretty neat, and I'll go with that. But up until then, with the kid and going and stuff, it was a little slower moving. And I thought, man, we've seen this story before, like you said. But you go from there because, again, he thinks that there's the boogeyman all over and says he's in the basement. And his dad says there isn't, right?
Yeah. That's exactly right. And the kid's right. And there is a boogeyman in the basement, and he's got this wolf. And we
Yeah.
subsequently reveal that it's Mr. Death and he has this wolf. But actually the boogeyman in the basement with this giant wolf is not killing the kid. He's actually there. He's a boogeyman, and the kid seems to be kind of afraid, but not
Yeah.
afraid. But yet, all of a sudden, we have this grandma-like character who seems to possess and put some black goo in the mind of this one of her underlings,
Yeah.
and they approach the house, and this guy kills this kid's parents, and this kid hides under the bed. After wandering down the stairs, seeing a horrific scene with his parents brutalized, blood
Yeah.
everywhere. Actually, and kudos to the artist, because on the one hand, this almost looks like almost like animated art,
Yeah.
almost like a Disney quasi
It's funny. I
eclectic
said Neil
Disney style
Gaiman.
art.
It reminds me of the movie Coraline, which ends up having a different art style, but it
That's
did remind me of that
good
a bit.
reference.
I'm like, holy crap. But you
Yeah.
keep going. And just as an aside, too, when you end up, you're like, oh, little Elliot, I'm your dad. No, you're sneaking that book again, you bad boy. Like, he's such a good little boy from what little you see.
Yeah.
Oh, man, there's no boogeyman. I'll always protect you. All that goes to bed. And then we go to the granny who has this other guy there with her, and it's like, all right, what do you want to do to the mother? Ooh, I mean, it gets really dark really quick. Like, and she even has to remind him, because he's like, maybe there's no. Remember all those impure thoughts you wanted to do? I'm like, oh my God, that's bad. And I really thought, like, oh no, what is this kid gonna see? But even then, you try not to make it so bad, but when the dad's there and his head was bashed in with a hammer and you just don't see the head, that doesn't make that less of a horrific scene for this kid, and it
No.
threw me off.
I know, and the funny thing is that and as this kid's sort of hiding, and the grandma and this guy are looking through the house, seemingly looking for this kid, all of a sudden, this person who we learned by the end of the story is Mr. Death, shows up
Mhm.
with his wolf. I mean, if he's the boogeyman, if he was the actual boogeyman, and he claims this is my house, it's my domain, get out. You're basically on my turf. One boogeyman to another, basically saying, get out of here. I'm thinking to myself, this boogeyman, he's fairly incompetent. I mean, you just let another
Yeah.
boogeyman, a grandmother, for Christ's sake, some who doesn't look near as strong as you, to wander into your house and kill the family of the kid that apparently you've been spooking for the last how many years. So I'm thinking,
Mhm.
like, what the hell is the purpose of Mr. Death and his wolf? And
And that's
why
the weird
are you living
play.
in the basement with this kid? I mean, I
And
know.
that's intriguing, though, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the thing, and I got mad because then when you say that, you're like, why couldn't you have saved the parents and gotten the hell out, you jerk? And then when you see how big he is, and I do like the play. I think that what they were thinking, and if I would guess, maybe somewhat of their elevator pitch at points, I think that they're playing the idea of almost like a Harry Potter, but instead of Voldemort being the big bad after Harry, it ends up being Voldemort who protects him. Because when they start talking about, and you said the turf war deal, when they mention Father Death, and Granny's taken aback. Oh my God, it's you! Like, what's going on? Like, but doesn't really think. She doesn't seem scared of him as much as you would think of what they're saying.
Yeah.
But then later when she says, like, they even say he's been gone for decades. Like, I think that this is where we're going to find out that this whole Boogeyman, gang war, whatever. Somebody did come in, some new hotshot came in and took down,
But
and he's been hiding.
well, I think the person that took him out, I thought the most interesting name that we don't meet in
Oh
this
yeah,
opening
yeah,
issue is Mr. 7 o'clock.
Mr. 7
And that
o'clock.
what an awesome name. I was like,
And
is
you
7
know what
o'clock?
that
Why are they called Mr. 7
You know
o'clock?
what my guess is? This is the craziest thing. My guess is Mr. 7 o'clock. I don't know why. I think that's the boogeyman that goes after the kids that get sent to bed early, because that seems 7 o'clock seems like the perfect
Yeah,
time
I
to
thought
get
the
in
same
trouble
thing.
and
Yeah,
sent to bed early. So they're bad kids.
yeah,
I go after the bad kids. It just feels like, oh man, I don't get to see the primetime TV shows tonight or so. It just
yeah.
feels like that. But I like again, that's well done to set that out there to be intriguing. I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot Mr. 7 o'clock. But yeah, I think that when they're talking about this and they like, oh man, like he's been gone forever and we can get him now. Like you may find out like he was taken down and it takes how many years, centuries for a boogeyman to. And I think that maybe he was just hiding out in the basement, because it's not like it didn't seem that Elliot, he was scared of the boogeyman, but it didn't seem like the boogeyman was actually out to kind of scare him.
Yeah.
Mainly, it seems as if maybe this boogeyman, Father Death, is the craziest thing, would sneak up and grab toys for his wolf. Because he said, Elliot kept saying, my toys end up going missing and end up in the basement. I think that it's just this boogeyman, Father Death, who needs to occupy his wolf.
Yeah.
So he's doing that, trying to be nice.
That's exactly
And
that.
even then, it is said, and they do seem like there's that weird play. They know who he is. They do seem scared a bit, but not scared enough of a Father Death. Almost like, again, they know, like, oh, you're nothing now, but they do freak out. They kind of freak out and go. And even when you have this other guy and Father Death comes up and he looks ancient and his, glowing eyes and things, and it's like, you better get out of here. I has to keep telling them over and over. I said you better go. But that other guy, he starts skedaddling. He starts running out. But you even have the weirdest play as the boogeyman ends up getting on the phone then and calling 911. I'm like, that seems very odd, but it was kind of a cool play where, I would wonder where in this investigation they're not saying, because my wife listens to true crime podcasts and things like that. Again, not my thing, because it always makes me sad and things. But you end up where they'd be like, who was this one who called it? That would right now be what the people in the true crime podcast would be saying. An older gentleman called, but then was that the killer? Was that somebody? So I wonder if that's going to play. And the idea that the police on the case are going to be trying, and you have to not let them find the boogeyman. But in that, I think the best part is that there's Elliot, scared of but believes in him. And
Yeah.
actually, is that part of it? If you have to believe in him to see them, then, because
Yeah.
he's getting books out about them
Well,
and loves it. And I'm telling you, it's a funny play. But when they have the page of the boogeyman book that he's reading that ends up being after that, things kick into high gear. I'm like, that seems to be like, okay, we're gonna have a little interlude. Boom, let's go back, because once you start getting Granny, getting a team up, we got to get this guy. Let's take this guy down, Father Death, when we can. Let's do it. This is our opportunity. This is going to be great. And she's really, I like the idea. She's an older lady. She's a grandmother. It looks like she's an old hag.
yeah.
She's more into the morsels and because I guess it even seems like if you scare or just kill people, you can eat them, but you scare them, you get this. And I thought that was a cool play too.
Yeah.
Like she's just in it for the treats.
Yeah.
But
I wonder if this Mr. Death, I'm assuming he must be on some sort of path to redemption, because
yeah,
if he's been in hiding and he doesn't want to be found, then he could just leave. But for some reason, he wants to take the kid with him. He says to the kid at the end,
Yeah.
we have to go. Well, why does he care about this kid's life? Because
Yeah.
if, he first of all, his name's Mr. Death. So if somebody's called Mr. Death, that doesn't strike me as a person that gives a shit whether anyone else lives or dies. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
but obviously, I think that probably he's in hiding. He's hiding from something, but there must be some connection to this kid, or maybe this kid is special in some way.
Yeah,
We're only
I
in the
thought so
opening
too.
issue. Why does he want to protect this kid? Why does he care if this kid lives or dies? He didn't. Obviously, the parents are dead. What does it matter if one other person dies? So I'm kind of curious to see what Mr. Death, is he on a path to redemption? What's his motivation? What's really going on? So this is a good setup issue, because I suspect in second, third, fourth issues we're going to get some backstory to some of these
Yeah.
characters of Mr. 7 o'clock, Mr. Death,
Yeah, I
the
want to see more of
grandmother,
that, right?
Yeah, so it should be pretty good. So I mean, it's I gotta say, as an opening issue, this is good. I mean, if you're into horror, like say if you're not into horror, you're not into horror. But as if anybody's into horror or anything else, and let's face it, with Nice House on the Lake and the horror
Yeah, a
comics
lot
have
of
come
people love
back.
it.
Something is killing the children.
It has been coming back
Yeah, so
big.
I,
Yeah.
I would I would definitely recommend this. Despite the name, I think the title is a little bit it's so cliche. Boogeyman is such a cliche title, people might
Yeah.
dismiss it and not give it a fair shake. I probably would have done it had we not been reviewing it, to be quite blunt.
Yeah.
I'm glad I
Uh,
reviewed this
yeah.
because this sort of surprised me a bit.
And I'm telling you, when I heard, and I did hear there was, I think it was Shock Shop. That
Yeah,
was an anthology horror
yeah,
book that came out this week from Cullen Bunn, and I,
yeah,
I had ended up hearing, Gabe said, "Oh, the Boogeyman, you should read that. It's pretty good." Then I heard, "Oh, there's this anthology." I thought this was the anthology. It's such a generic title that I thought, "Oh, this is going to be one of those titles about, oh, look at all the Boogeymen around. This person has this," and what I liked at the end, there was some funny scenes because again, he is now revealed. It's almost like he's a spy and he's been caught. He does seem to be going for redemption, and there's that little tidbit there. And I thought it was funny because you get Han Solo and Chewbacca going where he starts arguing with his wolf, where he ends up saying, "Okay, the police are going to be here," and he's saying this to the wolf: "The police are going to be here. We got to get out. We're going to get the," and then and he's like, "I don't know why I saved him, okay?" And then the wolf, and the funny thing is, it makes it even funnier. The Chewbacca deal, and like, "Hey, Chewie, stop yelling at me." I think it's better where the wolf isn't saying anything. He's actually talking as if he feels bad and doesn't know why he's doing it and kind of projecting. I hope that there's more of a connection. But he says, "I don't know why I saved him, okay? But
yeah,
if I had let them finish what they started here, it would have all been in vain."
yeah,
And then says, "Why am I wasting time with you? I don't have to justify myself." And that really sets up the idea.
yeah,
And again, you're sitting there, and this is Father Death, where Elliot, and I think some of the things are smartly played. Elliot seems to have been, scared that there's a boogeyman for a bit. You get that play with the dad. When he goes into the mom, again, oh, was he talking about the boogeyman again? So this is not something that just happened yesterday. He's been saying this, but kids go through phases. Oh, I had an imaginary friend. They blow it off. So this guy has been in that basement for a while and hasn't hurt them. I mean, he is a boogeyman, and these boogeymen are set up by this granny and whatever. When the boogeyman comes, this isn't "I'm going to hide under your bed and scare you." This is "I'm going to come and eat you. I'm going to kill your parents." So that's crazy. I thought another cool play because, like I said, we don't know all the parameters. Again, something with that, but we learn some things when Elliot is in the police station and says, "You don't understand. I don't remember." And you see that giant dog behind him, that just shows you that he sees it and they don't. So when you go through some things in here and, his dad and things like that, where there will be somebody, people, it seems, won't be able to see, these boogeymen and what they're doing. And this will all be going on. And
yeah.
that's pretty
One
horrific.
one of your comments made me think of the Mandalorian. Maybe this is the horror version of the Mandalorian, like a
Exactly.
lone wolf and cub,
Yeah.
except you got Father Death and this kid, and instead of the
Yeah,
little
it's that
Yoda
little
character,
Yoda there.
yeah, you got this young
I
kid
know it's that
with
little
Father
Yoda, but
Death,
people.
and so it's kind of maybe it's
I
kind of
like
cool,
that.
like yeah,
And then, yeah, and you have to have where it's a good story of, hey, we got to hit the road. Like you said, like the Mandalorian, this isn't part of his job. This isn't what he should be doing, grabbing this kid. But there seems to be a reason either that he knows to take him. Like you said, what's the connection? Is he important? Is he special? You may get the idea, like I said about, the idea of Harry Potter. You may get a weird Rick and Morty deal where this kid might have been able to keep the scent off of the other boogeymen that they I don't know. We'll have to find out why this was something. And then why did they target that house then at that point? But really it comes down, and when you end up where I don't like horror, but I do like stories with characters and with them trying to do some things in redemption, and also the idea of saving a kid. To me, all right, that's pretty cool to do. When the kid then says, "Why didn't you save my parents?" Like, you see, I think he's like, look at you. You could have done something. You could have
And
stopped them.
we the readers are asking the same questions. I
Yeah,
mean,
and that
what
broke my heart,
you know,
right?
why does Father Death want to tell? Why is he telling this kid come with me? Like, why does he care? He didn't seem to care about the parents. Maybe he wasn't around. Maybe he wasn't aware of it. But
Yeah,
you think
or
that I thought the boogeyman's supposed to know everything. So
yeah, really, what I got was the idea again, and there's stories like, and even just thinking of it, if me and you, say me and you are spies, and we're on a mission, and we end up, okay, we got to go from here to here, we're going to assassinate. I don't know what we're doing, but we're doing something. On the way, we see, some kid getting beat up by. You got to stay with the mission. You can't end up compromising your mission, even if you think you have to do that. I got to save that person. I got to do that. And I think that that's what they're playing at, almost the idea that he was there like, I can't get involved in this. I can't get involved. But then unfortunately gets involved after, when the kid to him, I think that maybe he's a little more special, even if it's not special overall, supernaturally. I think that this, guy redemption, and he doesn't think this kid should die, and
yeah.
really, that sort of thing. Though then he kind of then sets him up in this deal that feels like hopefully more of a trap or whatever, because he gets grabbed by the end. Like these guys coming in, this guy coming in. I thought that one of the cool plays was you don't really get to see him right away, but you see he has a peg leg, and I'm like, oh my god, that guy means business. So yeah, and it does get frightening, and frightening with boogeymen who we saw. These aren't just going to boo. Like they don't run around the corner and yell boo at you and jump scare. They're going to kill you and eat you, and you're like, oh my god. So I think a lot of things were well set up, and I'll even give you this deal. It's funny because afterwards, maybe Elliot's in shock, but he doesn't seem like he's scared of Father Death, and especially not that wolf. At one point, he's just on the ground, and the wolf's there looking at him with blood all over, and he looks wary, but he's not, crapping his pants and running away. So I think there is that connection with them. He's
well,
just mad. I mean, he's mad enough.
well, he
And
asks him why didn't you protect him?
yeah,
When he so he thinks of him as a protector. He doesn't think of Father
exactly.
Death as a killer. So
Exactly. And because he loves boogeymen, he read those stories. These seem to be his heroes, and he's like,
yeah.
no, 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 you didn't do that. Like, why didn't you protect them? These were and you're the good guy. They're the bad guys. It's a very crazy deal with that, and even has enough balls to start punching him. I mean, this is crazy for him to do this. And yeah, and then with that, the other people, and it seems like he's torn between getting caught or helping this kid. But I think this would be a redemption story. I think that it's pretty cool. I think that, we should probably, check out the second issue and things like that when it comes out, just to see if it ends up explaining more things. But what would you give it?
I honestly, I was inclined to give it maybe a 6.5 before, but
Okay.
after talking about it with you, I'm more excited about it. I'll go up to maybe a 7.2.
I'm a 7.5, so I even like it a little more, and
Yeah,
it is more the back half.
yeah.
If you start reading this and you're like, "No, really, like this is real generic and this is not going," it does pick up. And really, my 7.5 and maybe the couple of little, decimal points are for the intrigue I have. Maybe I'm being more generous in the idea that it's setting up things that seem more intriguing. And to me, once you have turf war, you're getting away from just straight out slasher horror, but you're starting to develop a world that I think might be really neat, and the idea of this hierarchy, and maybe even like you said, fiefdoms or gang wars or this. I think that that's a really neat idea to pull into the idea of maybe having the deposed leader who is just trying to hang out and do, maybe even just retire. I'm done with that world. Maybe he's just recovering, whatnot. But he seems to be, and you call a guy who's the boogeyman Father Death, that's pretty big. You're one of the heavy hitters, if not the heavy hitter. And we probably will, I would expect, find out the horrific things he's done in the past, and it's going to be like, oh my god, now he's with this kid. But it seems like he wants to help now, and at least, even if it's help because these new people are more brutal or they're the worst, whatnot, I don't know. But you would expect that him and Granny, with her age looking and all that, probably have a deep history as well. I wouldn't even be surprised they say that they were married at some point. I don't know. They seem like an old couple going at each other. But at the end, yeah, 7.5 for me. So pretty good books. we
Yeah.
had going, and there were a bunch of other books that came out this week. I apologize because I ended up where I got caught up with nonsense in this house and things like that. But I didn't want to obviously skip. I ended up having to skip last week. That was all my fault as well. So I apologize to everyone, including you. They are
Yeah.
Iraqi, but we'll start getting more books. I The problem is when we start talking about these, we start yakety yakking, and
Well,
like two books end up taking a while anyway. So I hope that people enjoy us
well, it's
going
not
a
just
little more in depth.
it's not just that. It's that because they're good, and I think, dare I say, as much as I love DC, because I know
Yeah,
I review a lot of DC. I know you obviously you do as well. Uh, I have an inclination to wanna review the second and third issues of some of these,
yeah,
even
yeah.
of the ones that maybe I don't like as much because some of them are getting better. But it's finding the time, and plus there's so many new number ones coming out all the time in the indie
Sure.
market, and we wanna talk about those, and we wanna get people excited about the indie market too. I know that's one of our motivations for you and I doing this, just to get people more
Hmm.
excited about indie comics and all the stuff that's out there. And, it's a great problem to have. It's a first world problem to be sure, but it's a great
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, it is. And again, I'm right with you. It's the same. I feel the same way with manga as well. That when anytime, and it's fun too. Just the idea that it's fun to get excited about books too,
Yeah.
because there's points where people seem to think that if you have a podcast or a YouTube channel and you're always yelling about stuff,
Yeah.
if that's not like that isn't a plan of ours. Like so we are legitimately frustrated and upset. I don't know about you, but there are times when I'm done the DC podcast or the Marvel podcast or anything that I do where you end up you're reviewing all the books that come out, so you're not picking and choosing, you're just doing them, and sometimes you get a week where everything just doesn't hit for you,
Yeah.
and it really takes a toll. Afterwards, I'm just like it feels like I went like 50 rounds with Mike Tyson at the end when it's just me kind of upset at myself or yelling at the books and me again, but it ends up where you just have that negative vibe and you're like I don't want to be but you can't not, you want to be honest. And then when we go to these, it's kind of like a loosey goose, like all right, now I can relax and enjoy. But really what I play it out as this indie podcast where people will say to me, why don't you just read the comics and enjoy them? And I say, well, that's we're doing this as a review thing. This show's actually me reading the comics and enjoying them. It almost
Yeah.
feels like it's just me and you talking about the comics that, hey, man, these are really cool. These are great. And it is a nice way to end the week because this pretty much ends my week of podcasting on Sunday night. Everything else has come out, even though this week I'm a little behind because I have to do some Marvel stuff after this, and that's going to throw me. It's a little late. But with that, I think that this is a nice ending of the week. Like, all right, we're positive. Now let's get back to the nitty gritty. And then, yeah, by the end. But this week, we'll figure out some things. And like you said, I'd like to go back to the number twos and threes and things like that, but we'll mix in more number ones. The problem is we like these things too much, and now
Yeah.
we after every one we'll continue with this one, and sometimes they do hit at a point to go, and maybe we will have a 12-hour podcast at one point, but not right now. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it. Like I said,
Yeah.
I really have to just get the books to you or figure out. We'll have to figure, and then I can read them ahead, and then we're good because you usually read them all. It's my lazy butt that ends up like, oh, I don't have time to do this because I just finished that, and so I apologize. We'll fix it. So I hope
Awesome.
bring it up to
Fantastic.
now though anyway because we're having fun with these and
Yeah.
doing these, and I think that both these books deserve to at least get a look. If you haven't been reading Starhenge, I think that if you picked up the first one, you might want to go to the second. The second one, now that's what's good about us doing the third. Second one was tough, but now you see that you can kind of get back on board with the third. So, but I don't think that that's a book that'll ever be easy to jump onto without reading the other issues. That might be something of that. I don't know if that's a detriment or what, but it's pretty dense, but it does build. So, yeah,
It
check that
it
out.
does, and yeah,
Yeah,
with Starhenge, remember too, it's only book one,
I
so
know.
it is something that, I mean, what I love about it is that when it's finished, and I'm just waiting for that finished book 1, 2, and 3,
Hmm.
however how many books he's gonna be doing, it's gonna make for a beautiful hardcover because that's inevitable, and so,
Yeah.
I have a sneaking suspicion I'll enjoy the full story because, well, I have faith in Liam Sharp.
Yeah, and
I
you're
have
really
faith,
digging it.
so, yeah.
Yeah. And here's the thing, too, just as an aside, there was a weird play this week that I almost called on, almost did like an audible at the line, and said to you, we actually could have done a Fantastic Four book this week, which would have been an independent book because of the way it was put out.
Right.
And it
Yeah.
was the Alex Ross Fantastic Four
Yeah.
full circle.
I have
The
yet to read
book's
that. Yeah.
incredible. It's
Is
incredible.
it?
I just want to shout out that anybody who could, it's expensive. I mean, the print, it's a hardcover. I think it's $25. So it's a
Yeah.
heck of a price tag. But if you like the Fantastic Four, you like Alex Ross, it's well worth. It's incredible. It's one of the best Fantastic Four stories that I've read. And
Right.
even people who, and again, you might say, well, you only read two, Jim. But even so, the idea of people who are lifelong Fantastic Four fans are going on about it, saying that it's the best that they've had, and the art's impeccable. It's so great. And the thing is, Marvel didn't put it out. That was what was weird. They didn't. They ended up so it got put out independently. So we could have skewed it, but it's a pretty dense book in that. But I just wanted to shout it out for people to check that out and maybe
Yeah.
pick it up.
Well,
So
maybe we'll do it. Who knows?
I
Whatever. If you're
yeah,
not if
I
you're not going to end up reviewing it anyway, we can
no, I'm
discuss
not
it.
going to review it on the regular show. So we could even do a side review of it sometime or something like that because it's really good. It's really good. It looks great. So with all that, though, I guess we're done. But remember, we'll go through our deal. But remember to subscribe. Look at all of Rocky's YouTube channel videos. Him and Jace do the DC stuff every week. I listen to it right when it pops out and end up listening to that. Shake my fist while
Yeah.
I'm doing it. And that's the thing, though, and I hope that people realize, like me and Rocky don't agree with everything. But yet, that's what I like. I like listening to things of people who have a different opinion, and even in this show, at
Yeah.
times we don't have the same opinion. We did tonight,
That's
but
right. Well, I
that's the
listen. I
deal.
listen to Weird Science DC podcast every week. It's religious. I actually I love Saturday mornings. I don't want you to get the wrong idea about me, but while I'm showering, I listen to you guys review
Yes,
DC Comics. Yes, that's how intimate I am with Weird Science DC
yes.
Comics. And then I go onto the Slack and bitch, whine, and complain about
Nah.
DC and often usually Wonder Woman related stuff and rant and raving. But it's good. I encourage everyone to go to Weird Science DC. You guys do review manga, DC, Marvel. You have
Yeah.
the website. I mean, it's really something. You guys got me. You guys like was 5 or 6 years ago. Listening, you guys got me really passionate and got me more back
That's
into
cool.
DC, and it was fun. It was fun reading comics again because for me, reading comics was such a solitary experience, and it was
Hmm.
like, oh my god, there's guys out there bitching about it just like me.
Look at him. Me and Eric pitching about comic. That's and again,
I'm
there's
not
some
alone
people.
anymore.
Some people complain that points that the we end up making it like a conversational thing. We
Yes,
try
you do.
to at
Yes.
least, and me and him argue about things all the time. We don't have a script. We don't go through things, and even in this, I don't have anything that I end up preparing. I'm not a scripted guy, so I like to just talk about things and go, and that's what we try to do in our thing. But that's what you and Jace do as well, and that's what I like. And also the idea of this is what we think. That doesn't mean that everybody else has to think that. And I get that from you as well. And then I see you get very frustrated and angry. And I like that because then I say, at least I'm not the only one who's losing their mind. So, yeah, all that stuff. But at the end, we do love comics. And I love DC Comics. I love DC Comics so much that they are like me getting frustrated at something. It's like I love the Philadelphia Eagles. They're my football team. And I will yell about the Philadelphia Eagles way more than anything else except DC Comics because that's how much I love it and want everything to be great and stuff like that. So
I'm with you.
hopefully that comes through. But these indie books are great too. And we're really, starting to open up on that and getting the idea where I'm reading more. I just have to find the time.
Yeah.
But there are good comics out there. And when you end up saying where, like you were telling me at one point, you were on a show where they were saying comics are dead, maybe certain people aren't liking certain company. But once you go to indie, it opens up. It's like manga. They both open up like limitless things to read. So that's
Yeah.
what's cool about it. But
For sure.
enough of that. Enough of the rambling by me. But yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for listening. Thank you for having me on once again, Rocky. And I'll let you send us off.
All right. I'll catch you guys later. Comic
Say-
Boom out and Weird Science out.